Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of the Wholehearted Leadership Podcast. And today I'm very excited that we have with us the former head of Asia of LinkedIn, Frank Koo. Frank, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Cohen. I'm so glad to be here.
Very excited to have you today. So, Frank, right, I just going to go straight to the point, right? Typically, we ask our guests a few questions to start. The first question is this: what to you is wholehearted leadership?
Well, the word wholehearted means, to me, really about dedicating yourself to leadership as a leader. And I think, as you know, many of our leaders are not exactly leaders, but just managing results or managing processes. So it's interesting, the wholehearted leadership that you define is really, to me, about leaders putting time and energy in doing a couple of things that involves leadership. And the first thing is really about providing a safe and trusting environment for people to be themselves and be able to have a voice. And the second thing is really about helping people do well in the work, in their life. And to this end, I think a leader should go beyond providing just extrinsic incentive to actually looking at the intrinsic motivation of individuals. So, for instance, giving them the autonomy, helping them to master their craft, and also recognizing their achievements. And I think the third one is really about not just helping them to perform, but helping them to transform as well, to be better tomorrow than they are today, by understanding their needs and wants, even going further to understand the family requirements, what they're doing outside of work, and supporting them in the transformation process. So I think really is to round up. It's really about being a better leader and dedicating time and efforts to leadership, making people better.
Well, I love that definition. I really like the idea of not just perform, but also transform. And I think sometimes I would say that even leaders are the kind of parents that we choose when we initiate into adulthood, into our career. Because I think when we're younger, when we're still dependent on our parents, we take leadership from our parents. But when we step into our career, looking to forge our own career pathways, I think having good leaders, having good managers are extremely important. They're pivotal in terms of our career trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I really like your definition of wholehearted leadership. So what then, in your opinion, is the common barriers holding leaders back from leading wholeheartedly?
I'll say that the couple of things right now leaders are faced with. One is a constant pressure to deliver performance immediately.
Yeah.
Secondly is really the ever-changing environment that requires every leader or every manager for that matter to be agile and adaptable. And thirdly, because of the constant need to deliver results instantaneously, a lot of leaders wouldn't spend the necessary time and energy to really take care of the people leadership component of the job. In fact, many of them are just managing results. They take what the company gives them as their own KPIs and pass it to the followers or the team members and expect them to deliver. They don't provide support for performance, neither do they help the team members to transform. So I think these are some of the barriers, right, that are actually impacting what we call leaders today, right? And that a lot of people managers are not taking care of the people leadership role, but rather just managing results.
Yeah, would you say that this pressure to perform really comes from the kind of like environment, the business environment where we are living in, when everything is changing, and in the past, right, leaders are more control centric, right? It's more like they have that that focus on managing, controlling the variables in order to produce the results. But now, in a world where everything is spinning out of control and leaders are constantly grappling with trying to even put their fingers on the pulse and to figure out what's going on. Would you say that this anxiety is really causing them to just, like forego their ability to be people managers and just really focus on the results?
Oh, indeed. In fact, environment changes so quickly nowadays. High interest rates, constant technological disruption, high expectation from funders, whether you are a startup or whether you are running an enterprise. There is a high demand for shareholders, from venture capitalists, for you to deliver immediate results. And of course, with the high interest rates, funds are more difficult to come by. So as a result, at the top level, people are looking at profitability, and there's a belief that performance drives profitability. And people then are not looking at the long-term profitability, but rather having their eyes more on the immediate profitability. So as a result, the environment actually creates a certain tension amongst many of the leaders now, right? And actually, interestingly, in the past, Cohen, when leaders are leading the teams in a more stable environment, like you say, there's a lot of command and control approach, right? But rightfully, in the ever-changing environment, leaders need to go into a sense and response approach, right? However, because of the pressure that's happening, a lot of the leaders nowadays are going back to command and control, right? To tell people that, these are the 3 things you must do in the next 3 months. We must achieve these 3 results. If not, you're out. Now, this is really about managing results and not really about wholehearted leadership, the way you define it in your program.
Yeah. So then people obviously will say that, wholehearted leadership, this all sounds good on paper. It's one of those kumbaya thing, right? Like, it's good to have, it's not necessary. But I beg to differ, right? I think that the over-focus on short-term results, right, can actually create a kind of a culture that is not fit for purpose for an organization, for a business moving forward, right? And I think that a wholehearted leadership culture, the one that you mentioned, right, a place where people can be themselves, have a voice, can be the best version of themselves, can actually transform and also evolve and grow and build their own sense of self-efficacy, their own sense of agency. I think that's and sense of autonomy, as you mentioned. This is extremely important. I think this kind of culture is actually the fundamental for sustainable long-term performance, and also the ability to innovate and sense and response, as you mentioned, right? Otherwise, what we have is just a short-term result.
You're so right, Cohen. The reality is that nowadays, employees have a different expectation of managers or leaders. In fact, when I was in LinkedIn just about a couple of months ago, there was this insights or data that shows that the top priority for employees looking for an organization to join is no more rewards. In fact, the culture of the organization has ranked number 1. So therefore, employees are expecting organizations to provide them with the necessary support as well as transformation, for them to be willing to give of the best, to elevate the productivity so that the company can do well. Now, with the wrong type of leadership, you can push employees to perform in the short term, but like you say, it's not sustainable, right? So how can you enable employees to really have the kind of mindset, dedication, willingness, and wellness to be able to do well in a sustainable fashion? And that is really the key challenge with many organizations today.
Yeah, talking about that, willingness and wellness, I like that, 2 W's. So this wellness part, right, I think people often misunderstand wellness. They think wellness is giving you, ping pong tables, bean bags, and yoga, and wellness programs. But I think one of the biggest components of wellness is psychological wellness. And psychological wellness comes when people feel they work in a place that's safe. Psychological wellness comes, I think I read a Gallup research also around psychological wellness comes from having a best friend at work, right? I think there's research around that. I can't remember by who, but if you have if you get along well with your team and your co-workers, you're gonna have wellness. You're gonna feel a sense of belonging. You're feel a sense of contribution. You're gonna feel a sense of mattering, right? So I think this is a piece that people often not talk about. So what's your experience with that?
Oh, totally agree. In fact, I love the way you put it, Cohen. You know, when you talk about psychological wellness, it's really about letting people feel that what they're doing is meaningful, that they have a voice, that they can bring the whole self to work, and that the organization and the leader takes care of them, not just at work, but also in life. Now, it's easier said than done, actually, for organizations and leaders, right? To be able to provide the necessary psychological wellness, a leader needs to, first of all, really truly understand what the employer needs. The employee's aspiration, his interest, and values, and also what can enable the employee to be able to be the best person that he or she can be. Right? Now, and sometimes it goes beyond just seeing a person at work. So, for instance, someone in the team may have to look after aged parents, or have young children, or some of our team members may just be mums coming back to work, and everyone would have different requirements. So when a leader has intention to provide psychological wellness, the key question is that how much do you understand the employee to be able to provide an environment that is safe, trusting, nurturing, and help the person to not just want to work, but or rather not just have to work, but wants to work and wants to have you as his or her leader. Now, this is something that is of short supply, and hopefully, with wholehearted leadership program or the podcast that you're doing, that we can actually spread the message out so that more and more leaders can get to have a certain awareness and understanding so that they can be better leaders.
Fantastic. So I think you also talk a lot about how there's a lot of uncertainty right now in the market, and we have been over the last 2 years listening to news of massive layoffs, and people are becoming very, very insecure at work. So if you are insecure, you're in survival mode, right? So how do you then have psychological wellness? So I think the question is not just about whether the leader can actually provide that. I think it's also incumbent on individuals themselves to also have that level of sense of security, a sense of psychological wellness, and they're willing to actually invest in their own self so that they feel this security, right? So I remember talking to you previously, and you did say something about career not as a ladder. So often, traditionally, we think of career as the corporate ladder. It's sometimes very interesting. The metaphors we use, right, actually shape how we think about something. But I think you have something interesting. You said something else that really intrigued me. If career is not a corporate ladder to climb, then what is it and why?
Yeah, I think career is not a ladder, but a jungle gym. And this is a phrase that's not coined by me, but it's coined by Sheryl Sandberg, who was the ex-chief operating officer of Meta right now, in the book Lean In. And it was very interesting to me because when I first started work a couple of decades ago, career at that time was indeed a ladder, right? All of us started off as a junior executive. We have plans in 2 years' time to be a senior executive, and then the next 2 years to become a manager, and the next 2 years to become a senior manager, and then become a director, and a senior director, vice president, senior vice president, so on and so forth, right? Just to make sure that we have the necessary status as well as reputation and maybe money at work, and maybe to make our mother-in-laws proud. But nowadays, career, if you take career as a ladder, you will be very disappointed. Because, for instance, if let's say you are a manager, you plan to take over your manager who's a senior manager's role in 2 years' time, what happens if the senior manager's role is disrupted? It's no more there. In fact, what happens if the whole team is disrupted? Right? Then what do you do? So therefore, it's important to think of a career not as a ladder where you go up and up all the time, but as jungle gym. So, for instance, you can imagine that, for lack of a better analogy, so imagine all of us as monkeys, right? And the organization is a tree. And we are partaking of the fruits, the fresh fruits in this tree that we are in right now. But the reality is that the tree will become dry in due time, the fruits will disappear. And so while we are partaking on the fruit in this tree, what do we have to do? We have to look out for other trees in the jungle to see which are the trees with good fruits. Right? Now, so that's one. That's really talks into environmental awareness. But the second thing is really about building your muscles. Right? It's not just about understanding, but also really building your capabilities. So you need to really practice your muscles, you swing around the tree, so that by the time your current tree dries up, you can then swing to a tree with fantastic fresh fruits, and you can still do well. Right? So this is about the jungle gym, because you are actually practicing your muscles, you're building your muscles in the gym through practices, right? So that you can swing to a better tree. Now, but then it's not necessary that you can actually arrive at the other tree when you swing, right?
Yeah.
So what happens, let's say you fail to reach the other tree and you fall down, right? And then there's another metaphor, which is really the safety nets below, right? That can help you, first of all, save you and help you to recover and bounce back so that you can climb up to another tree. Now, this safety net that is below you is really what we call our network. Right? It's important for us, or all of us in our career, to build a strong network who can help us, support us along the way, give us guidance. And when the worst happens, they can then help us to recover and bring us back to another tree, another career that we like, so that we can do the climbing and partake in the fruits.
Nice. So you are prevented from falling all the way down from a tall tree, by maybe your foliage, right? It's like foliage around you and building a network around you. So obviously, networking is something that people often have all kinds of misconception around. Oh, networking, I don't want to go. I'm an introvert. I don't really enjoy going networking, going around passing name cards. I think people really don't understand networking, and sometimes even if it's even beyond passing name cards, it's beyond a handshake and a hello and an elevator pitch. People often also think of networking as you go there because you are job hunting, or you go there because you are in business or you're self-employed and looking for clients. Like, for example, if you are a coach, right, you go there to look for clients. But I personally don't think so. I think that you don't go to a network to hunt. You go to a network to farm. And the best time to build a network is when you don't need it. You don't go to a network and try to build a network only where you need it. So what's your take on that? Because I'm sure you are possibly a prolific networker yourself, right? So what's your own approach towards networking?
Oh, yeah, absolutely right, Cohen. Like you say, the best time to build a network is when you really don't need it. And so then the question is that, what's the reason then, right,
Yeah.
for you to do it?
Yeah.
For a lot of people, it's really about a sense of curiosity, trying to understand what the other people or the community does, right? And secondly, once you do that, to be able to see how you can actually learn from the community, right? And also how you can contribute to the community.
Yep.
So to give you an example, I actually started building, not building a network, but actually reaching out to a group of people like yourself, actually, who are business owners, right, running portfolio careers during COVID, because I was quite curious. While I have a full-time job, I was curious about what a business owner really does, right? And also because it's COVID, I wanted to talk to somebody else, and that's how I started reaching out to people actually who comes to my LinkedIn feeds. I didn't realize that, but actually most of people who comes on my LinkedIn feeds are business owners and portfolio careerists, right, like yourself, right? And so when I reach out, first of all, out of curiosity, I realized that, hey, life can be very interesting out there. Right? And as I talk to more and more business owners, I become more interested in the kind of work that they do. And I also supported a few because of the role that I was in on LinkedIn to actually elevate their profile. And they were so appreciative. And then soon enough, I realized that this is really a very mutually supportive community. And over time, I realized that, hey, I would love to be a part of this community. And that's how actually, from reaching out to a new network, a new community, to actually being part of it and getting a lot of support from there, that helped me really when I came out to really run the business on my own, to know some of the paths that I should be taking, through their advice, and also some of the successful tips that they've given me. And so it has benefited me a lot. And like you say, it's not about just giving name cards, shaking hands, or finding a job, or really thinking initially about what I can get from the network, but it's really about really learning from people in the network and really seeing how you can contribute to them. And invariably, you get a lot of benefits in return.
Yeah, that's right. I think when you said something about reaching out to learn from them, because you become curious, right? It's like, because if you are doing something for a long, long time, what happens is that you're so entrenched, right? I mean, you have a certain modus operandi, you know the rules of the game, but sometimes we don't realize that other people in other industries and other job scopes, or even in other, like they're in business for their own, they have their own, KPIs, they have their own modus operandi, their own thought processes, and you never know, right, when you might actually use some of those in your own context. I think that's what one of our previous podcast guests, Adeline Tia, called cross-domain application, right? So I think one of the best ways to approach networking is kind of like going out there to learn. In fact, I wrote in a LinkedIn article, I don't call it networking, I call it net learning.
Oh,
so going out there.
Fantastic. I love this.
Yeah. I mean, there's a Chinese saying, right? 三人同行必有我师. So it's like you can learn from everyone. And so if you have a learning agenda, right, it takes the heat off networking.
Absolutely.
Talking about jungle gym, right? I want to talk to you about this exciting thing you're doing. You are, as you mentioned, you are starting out on your own, and you have called your business Next Play. So maybe tell us a little bit more about Next Play, like what inspired it and what made you want to do this.
Wow, yeah. Next Play is a term that is frequently used in LinkedIn when I was there. In fact, I got to know about this term Next Play on the second day I joined LinkedIn. And that was when the guy who was sitting next to me was leaving the company. And then his team members came together and said, we want to celebrate your Next Play. Cakes, champagnes came in, and everyone was very happy. And so I asked at that time my colleague, I said, hey, so what are you doing? Are you getting promoted? He said, no, actually I'm leaving the company. And I was quite surprised. I said, well, it's the first time I've seen people celebrating someone leaving the company. Because, as you know, Cohen, sometimes in some organizations, when someone just puts in a resignation letter, that person becomes either the worst enemy of the company, or people starts forgetting about this person, right? So it was a very interesting culture on LinkedIn. And I learned a bit about it and realized that actually it's really a culture of transformation that LinkedIn wants to provide for employees. That whenever someone has the intention to do something different, it must be great. And underlying it, LinkedIn actually provides a lot of career counseling. Managers are expected to be career coaches for employees. And when somebody leaves the team, the manager is recognized as a talent magnet.
Ooh.
He's done a good job, right? Even if somebody leaves the company for another organization. I said, wow, this is something that we really need to bring out to the whole world. But as you may have experienced, when you go out in the world, nobody talks about Next Play. And so it was about a year ago when I decided that, I have enough of corporate life. At that time, I was with LinkedIn for close to 8 years. I said I want to come on my own. And when I think about what sort of organization I want to set up, the word Next Play came into my mind. Right? And what I did was that I actually look at the word next play and I try to innovate on it. And it became a methodology that I'm now using to work with other people who are thinking about the career development. So to me, the word next, N-E-X-T, stands for the new, that's N, E-X stands for experience, and T stands for transformation. And so this is like a mindset change, right? If you want to have a better career, what is the new you that you're going to be? What are the experiences that you would love to have? And if you want to have these experiences, what are the transformation that you're prepared to undertake? Because COVID, as you know, taking on a transformation is not easy.
Yeah.
You know, it stretches ourselves outside our comfort zone. There's no guarantee of success, maybe a bit of pain. But if you want to be the new you, all of us have to transform. So this is a kind of mindset, and I encapsulated this under the word next. And play is really a methodology. P stands for plan, then L stands for learn. A stands for action, taking action, right? And Y stands for yay.
Celebrate.
Exactly, celebrate. So if you have planned sufficiently, learned well, and taken action, and obviously after taking action, you realize that your planning may have to be revised, right? And you iterate. But at the end of the day, what will you get? Eventually, you get a happiness, and wellness. So, yay.
Yay, I love it. I love it. I love it. When you mentioned about transformation requires a bit of pain, right? I mean, the image I saw is actually the process of chrysalis, right? A caterpillar spinning a cocoon and then being in that cocoon before it actually transforms into a butterfly that can fly.
Mm-hmm.
And actually what many people don't realize in the process of being in a cocoon, the caterpillar actually turns into semi-liquid state.
Mm-hmm.
Just imagine that, like all your flesh around you turning into semi-liquid. That's pretty scary. But I can only imagine that is the kind of process that a caterpillar needs to go through before it transforms into a butterfly, right? And that requires some pain. So very often people are not willing to pay the price for that transformation. I mean, we both live in Singapore, and we know that the Singapore government has always been one of the biggest proponents of learning and reskilling people, right? It's no longer just upskilling, but really reskilling, and also really be able to retool themselves to be able to be agile and then to take on new career opportunities. But I still see that many people are resistant to this, right? They are not willing to pay the price of that pain in order to transform. So what is your take on this? Because I like to just dive deeper into this transformation, because I am a big believer of transformation.
Mm-hmm.
I have gone through a tremendous transformation process myself. So I'd like to hear your thoughts about that.
Right. First of all, Cohen, I love your associative thinking ability.
Thank you.
About caterpillar, the cocoon, the pain to the butterfly. I think this is a gift that you have. And when it comes to how people would love to or hate to transform, I find that this is a common problem amongst many people, because first of all, change is difficult for everyone, right? Including you and I, definitely.
Yeah.
Right. But how do you overcome this difficulty? Right? How do you ensure that we have the right mindset to actually take the leap, even though it can be difficult or painful? Right? And this calls to really developing a growth mindset. Right? Now, and that's why in my next play, philosophy, the next, first of all, is mindset. Right? Before you go through the process. Right? Now, I've seen within the ecosystem of career development in Singapore, a lot of people look at the process before changing their mindset. So, for instance, our Singapore government has done a fantastic job in terms of coming with the job transformation map, industry transformation map. There is no reason for any citizen and resident in Singapore not to go for any training.
Yep.
Because there's so much funding around, right? However, the take-up in training, especially SkillsFuture funded training, is actually pretty low. And I've seen a lot of people who have gone for training felt that they were forced to go for training because they had no choice, right? And that's because they look at the process before changing the mindset. And that's why my focus in Next Play is really to help them change the mindset. So for instance, before you think about the new you want to be, you must understand what's the current you.
Yeah.
Right? You must think about, well, through the number of years that you have worked, what are the interests or passion that you have developed, right? At the same time, what are values have you actually built for yourself, right? And also, what skills have you had so far that can actually bring you to the next level? Now, having done that, then we need to think about what's the aspiration we have, right? Now, aspiration need not necessarily just be career related. It can be aspiration about our family, right? Or for the world, some people may have an aspiration to contribute back to a charitable cause. That is fantastic, right? So only when we understand what's the current you and what's the new you want to be, now then you can think about then what experience you want to undertake, right? So for instance, if you are currently doing a job, let's say A, you want to take on B, and then there'll be a series of experience that you need to undertake, right? And what are these experiences, right, to move you to B? Now, and then move back and think about what sort of transformation that you need to go through if you seriously want to take on B. And the reason why you want to take on B is because B is aligned with your aspiration and your values and your strengths, right? So having done that thinking, then you can then go out and look at, so what are the upskilling or reskilling programs that are available that I can go for, right? So that I can move to B. So in my view, only after you have considered your own situation, you have considered external possibilities, then will you be able to be very convinced that there's something you want to do, and when you take on learning and reskilling and upskilling, that you'll be successful. So I'm actually working with organizations to actually try to reverse the whole cycle, to help employees think about the why before they look at the what and the how. And hopefully this works within the context of our society.
You're so right. I think the whole mindset thing is very important, but I think also it's importantly, people need to be excited about it. I think very often we are a culture that has become extremely good at surviving. We are very resilient at surviving. We are very good at satisficing, but we stop there. We don't dare to give ourselves the permission to dream. I think once upon a time when we were younger, we used to dream, right? But as we go on, right, I think that ability to dream, the ability to aim higher, have sadly been lost to us. And when you said next play, the word that really came to me was both next and play, because play involves a sense of innocence, a sense of possibility, right? Because when we play, anything's possible, anything goes, right? When we are given a few pieces of Lego, we think of all kinds of possibilities about what we can build. And the word next, right, is like we often just forget about what's next, right? We keep asking ourselves what's next. We are lost, but I don't think that what's next is layered with a sense of anticipation, a sense of excitement, the enthusiasm. I think enthusiasm is one of those things, right? I think Winston Churchill is the one who says that success is the ability to move from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm. And I think people need to be re-enthused about their own career as well, beyond just the next paycheck, beyond just paying bills, beyond just that next holiday, that vacation.
Totally agree, Cohen. In fact, if you look at our society, in the past when Singapore, or in fact Asia as a whole, are developing nations, there's a need to suffice, right? There's a need to make sure that people work hard, follow instruction, so that the whole society can progress.
Yep.
But now it comes to a time where society has changed. Many countries, including Singapore and many Asian countries, have become developed or close to developed status, right? Now then, we cannot continue to just follow others, cannot continue to just rely on hard work. There's a need, like what you say, for people to be able to dream, to innovate, to create, to lead the way. And because of this change in social circumstances, the mantra that's required to be successful is different.
Yeah.
Right. So therefore, and at the same time, the society, the world right now is more uncertain. So there's no fixed answer for every problem.
Yeah.
Right. There are many answers to many problems.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you envision the right way to go about solving problems? It's really to be creative, to be able to understand, what are the possibilities, and learn along the way, make pivots along the way.
Yeah.
Right. So this requires a total change of mindset.
Yeah.
Right. Now, and the first thing that is required in the change of mindset is to be able to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Right. Stretch outside of comfort zone, so that we can learn new things and adjust along the way. Right. There are still a lot of people who have a fixed mindset, for lack of a better term. They do not believe that things can change for the better if they put themselves in to take on some transformation. And unfortunately, these people will forever remain behind. And that's where we want to try to see whether we can actually, together as a community, to actually elevate people's mindset, to believe that if they're able to stretch themselves outside the comfort zone, they can actually be better.
Yeah.
Right, no matter what happens.
I think you just mentioned something important, right? It's like creating a community for people to elevate the mindset. I think mindset is one of those things, right, that I would say is a bit of a lag indicator rather than a lead indicator. Let me explain myself. Right, if I were to stand and say, hey, you got to change your mindset, right? You seem like you're standing on a pedestal preaching to people. Right, and people say, yeah, right, just another mindset conversation, right? And people get sick and tired of that. But I think mindset really change when you are put in an environment that changes you. Let me explain. I think Singaporeans, I speak about Singaporeans and I may be wrong and I stand to be corrected. But I think that we have gotten very good at content learning, right? If you think about most of our education system in the past, right, that's how I was raised. I'm sure that you can relate to this. It's about memorizing content and regurgitating content. So we become very good at content learning. But what the biggest culture shock and root shock that I have is that when I came out into the corporate world, I realized I was very good at my content, but I was really struggling. I was lost. I didn't know how to present. I didn't know how to communicate. I didn't know how to network, build relationships. I didn't know how to showcase my work. And therefore, I found myself being left behind. And when I step out into running my own business, I realized that a lot of it is all contextual learning rather than content learning. And I think I learned the biggest root shock of it when I went to China to do business, or when I do go to China to give talks, give workshops, right? I tend to take everything very literally, right? And then I realized that actually you can't take things literally, right? You have to take things contextually. So sometimes when people say something, they may not really directly mean what they say. That there's a certain context behind that. And but when you actually set the context right, the content will come. The content become relevant in the context of the wider picture, right? So I learned this very much the hard way, and I think that we need to make that change. Although we have been making pivots to our education system into problem-based learning, into more less emphasis on academics and a lot more about co-curricular activities and project work. But I think this is still rather driven top-down by policy. But I think we need to really create and curate experiences where people can change and people learn and discover for themselves.
Yes, you're spot on, Cohen. In fact, when we were growing up, like you say, is the system that went through in education is a very much of an exams-driven system, right? And in an exams-driven system, number one, the teacher is the sage on stage.
Mm.
Right. Secondly, there's only one correct answer to every question or problem. Right. In fact, not only that, there's only one way to arrive at one correct answer to every question or problem. Right. But like you say, in the real world today, it's very different. Right. And if I say that to the credit of the Ministry of Education in Singapore, the education system has changed quite a bit.
Mm.
Right. And in fact, to your point on really understanding the context, right? I think it's really about developing in our students, hopefully, the self-awareness as well as the environmental awareness, right? Which is something that was short supply in the previous education system when we were growing up, right? But nowadays, through project work, through problem-based learning, through going out of the classroom into the real world to learn, through having multiple pathways, not necessarily just the academic pathway to success, right? You can go on the technical side, you can go out and take some time to work and come back to school through a lifelong education support. I think there's a journey within Singapore as well as some Asian economies to actually go towards, like what you say, contextual-based learning, to enable people to actually look at understanding the environment better, to solve real problems in the environment for which there's no one single answer, right? There's no one way to answer, definitely. And to be able to interact more freely with teachers in a co-learning environment.
Co-learning, I like that word. Yeah.
That's right, yeah. And I think we're moving towards that direction. But it's not easy, I would say, even if the policymakers are very enlightened, it's not easy for, let's say, a teacher who has been teaching in one way for the last 2 to 3 decades to be able to change so quickly. But I'm hopeful that, and I'm involved in the education system in Singapore and in Asia to a certain extent. I'm pretty hopeful that we are in the right direction, and we'll reach there sometime in the future.
And you're in the space of adult education, of course. So to come back to kind of like draw a full circle around your metaphor of the jungle gym. So is that what you're intending to create with Next Play, to like create community and also immersive experiences like a kind of career jungle gym, for one of a better metaphor, because that's your metaphor, for people to actually be there to play, to explore, to experiment, to try, to learn, and also to then iterate, and through the whole process they kind of like discover self-awareness, and they also get changed by the process.
Oh, indeed. First of all, is really to build self-awareness and environmental awareness. To know that the world is different from what it was 5-10 years ago. To know that, as you said, play is usually unstructured.
Yes.
Right? There's a lot of things that's happening. In fact, it can be better than what you expect.
Yes.
Right? So to be able to dream,
yes,
like you rightly put it, so and also put in the effort. Right? Take on experiences and experimentation to be able to come towards a different identity for yourself. And doing this evolution, you can become a better person. And this is my hope for what Next Play can do, essentially to help organizations and people transform work into play. And I do believe that if this can happen, then people will find more fulfilling lives, organizations will do better, and society will become more developed.
That's beautiful. I'm very excited about your Next Play, really. I mean, I'm just picturing that, right? Straight away, it gives me a lot of the idea of co-learning. I just thought that was so brilliant, right? I mean, the traditional idea of learning is always about recipient of learning and dispenser of learning, right? A sage on stage teaching a student, right? But I think co-learning is really where, you know, the whole 70-20-10 rule of learning, right? 10% of our learning comes from formal workshops, right? Setting. And 20% of learning, right, comes from things like coaching, follow-ups. But really 70%, and that's what many people outside of the L&D, I think I'm a geek about L&D, right? We all know this 70-20-10 rule, that 70% of your learning really is all contextual. More than just on-the-job training, but also learning from your network, as we talk about net learning, and also learning from people from other industries, and how we actually meaningfully reflect on our experiences, our lived experiences, because then those kind of learning is no longer just head learning. It becomes full-bodied learning, right? You embody it, you internalize it, right? And it's like you know what you know. You know that you know that you know. It's not just like I know or I guess I know or I have a little bit of inkling that I know, but it's really about I know that I know that I know. That kind of whole-body learning, I think that's so powerful.
Wow, I love your whole body learning concept, Cohen.
My whole body is moving. For
Yeah,
those of you who
I
are
can see
listening
the
to this,
excitement coming out of you. And in fact, in line with whole body learning, it's really about, the environment is getting more complex,
Yeah.
more ambiguous,
yeah,
and therefore no one has all the answers,
yeah,
right? So what do you do to be successful?
yeah,
You bring together the talents of everybody. So therefore, you have whole body learning, you have co-learning, we have co-creation. Even in the area of mentoring, you have bi-directional mentoring,
bi-directional
right?
mentoring.
And this is how we can come up with, answers together. We can come up with solutions together. We can solve the world's biggest problem, wicked problem, some people call it, and so that we can be better, next year than this year, right? So I think the mindset, like you say, has to change in the sense that back to your idea of wholehearted leadership, no leader can own 100% of the solution. Right? There's a need to make sure that every leader rallies people around him or her in order to make sure that, when a solution is thought of, everybody moves together. And when there's need to change, we learn and we change so that we can be more relevant to the future.
Talking about leaders rallying people together, how do you rally people together when everyone comes with their own, for want of a better word, baggage, our own lived experiences? And I think something I think in our private chat, our private conversation, you shared something about what you're learning currently right now in the Masters of Change program with INSEAD. Can you share a little bit more about how can a leader, bring together, orchestrate together a group of people with diverse backgrounds, diverse experiences, and still be able to rally them together in the same direction?
Right, yeah. And this is something that I'm continuing to learn, and I've seen in the workplace quite a bit of times as well. And the reality is that a lot of times when a leader implements strategy, it's always top-down, or in the psychodynamics approach, it's called outside-in. Right? A company will have 3 or 4 strategies, and when a leader takes on the strategy, he'll say, okay, let's do these 3 or 4 things to a team. But the reality is that there is a challenge on the ground, right? People can feel anxious about any change because every strategy would require a change, logically. And people will react differently, like you say, to the change in them, right? And in the whole, it's called defense mechanism, right? And a lot of times, people exhibit different types of defense mechanism, right? We can spend a whole day thinking about that, but in general, there'll be pushback, right? So the way to really ensure that strategies can land on the ground and work on the ground is really about, first of all, understanding the various anxieties that people have, right? So, for instance, some people may fear that they lose their job. Some people may fear that they don't have the skills to implement certain strategies. Some people may fear that the leader is just pushing them too hard. They're working double the number of hours that they have to work, right? These are all anxieties. But if a leader really provides a safe environment, again, in psychodynamics, it's called a container of some of these anxieties, right? For people to be able to express themselves, right? So that they can bring the anxieties out. And then with this knowledge, then we can devise better ways to be able to make the strategy work for people so that not only are they believing that they have to follow the strategies or implement it, but they would love to because there's a common belief by the whole team that it's going to be better for the organization, for themselves in the future. So really leadership requires a good a leader needs to look at both the top-down as well as the bottom-up response in order to ensure that whatever transformation we want to undertake in an organization is going to land well and work well. And in this connection, psychological safety, empathy, making people feel that they are heard, all these are very important elements of a successful transformation.
I love that. Love that. Psychological safety, right? Recently, I just heard a new phrase that moves beyond psychological safety. It talks about psychological courage. Not just for you to feel safe, because safety in the long run can become safe, comfortable, right? But how then do we have that safety to also be willing to challenge the status quo? So the psychological courage to say, this is good, but can be greater, right? How can we make this better? Now, that requires psychological courage as well, more than just safety, right? So how then do we equip people, especially a lot of us, right? We're still trying to wrap our head around a lot of things. And we were also, both of us are Asians. We are raised in a culture of collectivism, of, going the status quo, go with the flow, don't rock the boat, right? So how can we actually now reverse that trend and suddenly encourage people to have the psychological courage to challenge the status quo in a good way, of course?
Right. Now, first of all, I love your analogy of don't rock the boat. My thinking is even if you're not rocking the boat, the big waves that comes upon the boat may cause it to collapse, to capsize.
That's a good one. That's a
Right.
good one. I love that. I love that. I love that.
Yeah. So I guess the requirement for the whole organization is really to be mindful of where the waves are coming, right? So that you can take proactive measures. And you're right in saying that the psychological courage goes beyond psychological safety. And I also believe that psychological safety will provide the foundation for psychological courage to take place.
Yeah.
Right. So with psychological safety, what happens is that people can feel that they have their voice and can voice it out, even if it's a voice of disagreement. Right. Now, and only when there's psychological safety that the voices of disagreement can be accepted, can be analyzed, put together, and for a better solution to take place. And that's how it builds upon the psychological courage to disagree, right? At the same time, you will take another sliver of organizational development. There is a lot of focus by progressive companies on diversity and inclusion.
Yes.
Right. So now there is a belief, especially with progressive organizations, that when you bring people with different ideas as well as different background together, then the solutions can be better, right? And this is very contrary to what you mentioned in the past, where everybody has to follow a common way of doing things, right?
Group think.
The group think, right?
Yeah.
Now, and I know that a lot of organizations still have groupthink, right?
Yeah.
But if organizations accept that diversity can help elevate transformation and success, then the next question is that how do you ensure that different opinions, different ideas are included?
Yep.
Because diversity doesn't necessarily bring inclusion. In fact, diversity makes inclusion more difficult.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So that really requires the skills of a good leader to bring together diverse opinions, make people feel that even though they may not agree, that their opinion is included. And at the end of the day, when a decision is made, that people with a different idea will commit to supporting the decision. Right? So it's not a group thing, but it's really about thrashing it out, having all the ideas on the table, finding the best idea, and everybody running along together. And that will become psychological courage.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's I like the way you think about it. Like giving people a chance to have their voice heard, and still be able to stand by what is the best for the collective, right? So
Even if you do not agree.
even if you don't agree, I think we often misunderstand that, right? It's like if you suppress people's voice, then wanting to have their voice heard now becomes imperative for them because they just want to feel respected. I think people will do anything just to feel respected. I think you can give people everything they want, but if you just disrespect them, that's it. If you just disrespect them, you go on the wrong side of them. So people want to be seen and heard. So giving people a chance to be heard, right, fulfills that need for them to be respected, to have
Absolutely.
their voices respected.
That's right.
But I can respect you, but I can disagree with you, and that's disrespect. Disagree respectfully. That space for constructive disagreement. That space where you hold. I think who was it who says that the mark of an educated mind is the ability to hold opposite viewpoints without having to make a stand. Right. So a space for constructive disagreement, and that's psychological courage.
Yeah. In fact, I heard another phrase which is the idea of wisdom is to be able to hold two opposing opinions while remaining sane. So just like what you say, right? So and it's very important because a lot of times some leaders will say that I am always right. Right? We've heard about it. Number one, the boss is always right. Rule number one. Rule number two, if the boss is wrong, refer to rule number one. That is really very much the whole old way of leading teams. New way of leading teams is when a leader encourages a diverse opinion, but summarize it well and come to a decision and rally the people to follow. And someone says that, it's not what you say or what you do that matters, but how you make me feel that makes me want to follow you.
Wow. Something just came up for me, and I think it's the work of the University of Miami professor Isaac Pilotensky, and he has done a lot of research around the idea of mattering. And I think that's something that I think the society needs to discuss a lot more. I think people more than just want meaningful careers. I think a very big part of meaningful careers is that they have a sense of belonging, which is inclusion. But they also want to feel a sense of contribution. They want to matter. And Isaac Pilotensky's research, I think, is summarized best way in the best way when he said this: "Do I matter?" is split into two things. Am I valued? And do I add value? Am I valued? And do I add value? So I think it's necessary for leaders to make people feel that they are valued and give them the opportunity to add value. So what's your reflection on what I've just shared?
Wow, this is so good. In fact, adding on to this, am I value or do I add value? So if I can just extend upon your thinking, am I value really relates to, does my leader, first of all, understand me well enough? Does he or she understand my aspiration, my strengths, my values, and be able to work with me appropriately based on these couple of important elements to me? And when this happens, I, as a follower, will feel value. Right? And second thing is about, am I adding value? I think you can unpack this a couple of ways. First of all, there needs to be some clear and consistent direction or objectives. Right? Otherwise, I wouldn't know what value means to the leader, to the organization. Right? Secondly, it's really about whether I have the skills and the capabilities to deliver. Right? If I do, I can then be on the way to adding value. If I don't, regardless of how much I want to, I may not be able to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So skills building is there. The third thing is recognition.
Yep.
Right? I will know whether I'm adding value when the leader, the organization, recognizes my contribution. So really, it's really a combination of expectation setting, support, and recognition that comes to play to establish whether anyone feel that they're adding value. And then on the other hand, whether the person is valued is really a matter of providing a safe environment, listening to the employees and understanding the employee well, and then applying the right approach to the employee to make the employee feel that they are valued.
Oh, that's so good.
Oh, this is just off the cuff,
But it's so good.
but it's a wonderful statement that you made, so that I was just thinking of how to extend upon this
I
statement.
love that, because I just remembered that the research I read about from Isaac Pilotensky. So just recently just did something with my team, with every single one of my team members, called this best possible working relationship exercise. And it's actually founded by a gentleman I met, Michael Bungay Stanier, who wrote the book The Coaching Habit. And this actually came from the book How to Work with Almost Anybody. And I loved it because he shared about this idea of a keystone conversations covering 5 key questions. The first question is, what's your best? So really getting to know your employees and your team members best, how to bring the best out of them. The second question is, what are your preferences and standards? So your preferences and standards are like your working habits, like you don't reply to emails on weekends, like you always reply by within 24 hours on a weekday, right? These are like preferences and habits. Like you need to know people's preferences and habits so that you do not step across the line, and build like healthy boundaries. The third question is, what's your best possible, or what's your best previous working relationship ever? So from that, you can actually get to know how to bring the best out of that employee, or the best out of that team member. And of course, the fourth one is, what's your worst ever working relationship? So you know what are some of the landmines and some of the things that you want to avoid. Yeah. And the fifth question is, how do you repair the relationship if the relationship goes sour? And I think good relationships are repairable relationships. Very often we have this false idea that a good relationship is honeymoon all the time, hunky-dory all the time. But when things go wrong, right, how do we repair that relationship? So what's your way of dealing with conflicts, creative conflicts, the one we talked about early on? And I just really like that one. And so when you just mentioned, you have mentioned so many times, like, that the leaders really need to know their team members. And I think this just came back to me, and I'm learning so much from you as well, Frank. And it just came back to me and realized, yeah, really this keystone conversation with these 5 questions I've just listed is so key, it's so important, right, to really get to have that wholehearted relationship with your team members.
Yeah, I love this. It's the keystone questions.
Keystone conversation.
Keystone conversations.
With these 5 questions. And I highly recommend that every leader do this keystone conversation with their team members, so that you can create a best possible working relationship. And I really like the word best possible working relationship, because we all want perfect relationships, but perfect doesn't exist. So if perfect doesn't exist, then what does it mean? Does it mean we should tolerate bad relationships? Does it mean we should tolerate abuse? No, right? It's like we all want to have the best possible relationship. And why shouldn't we aim for that, right? Does it mean we'll never fight? Does it mean we'll never have disagreements? No. But it just helps us to have a more mature and principled way of dealing and approaching that relationship.
Oh, indeed. In fact, your discussion about keystone questions made me think all the more the importance of building a safe and trusting environment within the team. Because once you have that, and you ask the keystone questions, the 5 keystone questions, then the employees will answer very authentically.
Oh, yes.
Right? I'm sure, Cohen, you've seen situations where the right questions are asked, but not necessarily the right answers are received, just because people don't feel safe being themselves, being vulnerable, being authentic.
Yeah.
So psychological safety actually builds the ability to get authentic response. And at the same time, the authentic response with the keystone questions build further psychological safety, right? So that over time, you can resolve challenges in, as you mentioned, relationship, or repair any issues that both parties will have, right? And therefore, it goes back to really a leader having to provide a safe and trusting environment where people can be themselves, and so that both the leader and the team members can thrive.
Beautiful. I can see that you are doing that, because when you, in your last week of LinkedIn, I saw you posting about all the people you have met, all the employees you have worked with over the years, and I can really see that they enjoy working with you.
Oh yes, in fact, I was pretty blessed to really have people that are self-starters and know the work better than I do most of the time, to be able to enable and empower them to be the best they can be. And the results have been pretty phenomenal for me, and therefore, I live to tell. And hopefully, I live to provide certain support for other people as well.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Um, let's talk about career, right? Since you talk about career, right? Your own career trajectory, right, has been one that really involve a lot of changes, pivots, and taking risks. Can you talk us through some of your career experiences? What are the biggest risks you have taken, and how have that paid off?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, my career spans a couple of different sectors. I started with technology. I was hired by IBM straight out of school as their management associate. And my first career pivot started just after the global financial crisis. And that was a time when a lot of people were made redundant, including many in the technology sector, in which I was a member of. My job was safe, but a couple of my friends were made redundant, and I remember two of them went into depression. So I supported my two friends through depression, and I realized that it was very meaningful for me. That was when I started thinking about, how can I do my work in a way where I can help people? And that became ultimately my first career pivot, when I decided to take a drastic pay cut to move into the education sector, so that whatever I do, I can feel that I'm helping people. And in education, you develop the next generation, you work with people who are very mission driven, and I would say that it was a good pivot for me, even though financially it was at that time I thought was challenging, but I weathered it through. And my next pivot happened when I joined LinkedIn, and in fact, after 8 years in LinkedIn, when I was in LinkedIn, I have a chance to see the changes in career. I had a chance to see disruption in jobs and disruption in the economy, because LinkedIn has a huge amount of data and insights. To me, it's a crystal ball I can look into.
Yeah.
And I decided after 8 years in LinkedIn that I wanted to have a positive impact on people's career and life development in a very personal way. And I decided then that I would leave a corporate job and come out on my own, right? And hopefully be able to help people in a more personal level. Well, in my view, is to help people and organizations transform work into play, right? So throughout the whole cycle, I would say that yes, I have taken quite a bit of risk in these two pivots, but looking back, it's worth it. In the first instance, I was really living out what I wanted to do at that time, which was really to help people in the job that I would undertake. And in the second instance, when I came out on my own, it's really to help people in a personal way, right? And I was able to do that on both counts, because I actually did an analysis on my financial positions at that time, right? And also my health position at that time, and realized that, yes, I was ready on both counts to be able to take a risk on my finance, right? My health was able to support me through the changes, and because it was a good cause, aligned with my vision, therefore it's the right thing to do. I've never regretted, I've never looked back, after making the two changes.
I really like the sense of mission that shines through your storytelling. I mean, through the stories that you've shared. Especially when you said something about you wanted to train people, you want to be in education business because you want to help people who are mission driven. And I think that you are You're always very mission driven in the way you approach things. Have you always been like that when you were a child? Were you always very clear about what you want to do, or is it something that kind of like you discover along the way?
Well, it's something I discovered along the way. When I was a child, I came from a very humble background. So when I started to work, right, it's really about, first of all, how do I pay back my study loans,
Very practical issues, yeah.
right? Yeah, and
Yeah.
how do I have sufficient finances to support my parents,
Mm.
right? And so the first part of my career before the global financial crisis was really very materialistic driven.
Mm.
It was really about, what is the house that I want to have, the car that I wanted to own. So it was totally materialistic and was driven by status. If you're able to, own a car, you're able to manage an organization of certain size, status comes along with it. Now that was what was a driver for the first stage of my career. And it was during the global financial crisis when I was helping my friends through the depressive cycle that I realized that there's something that's more to it, right? It's good that you have some financial independence, but life is more than just earning more and more money. And that was where I decided to make a big switch, take a pay cut, and go into a sector which is more meaningful to me. And likewise for the last couple of months when I decided to leave corporate job, and I've, in LinkedIn, I've had such a fantastic experience on LinkedIn that after leaving corporate job, I told myself that I would not want to join another company anymore, right? And this experience has been great because, I get to know you, Cohen. I get to know a lot of very mission-driven people, right? I know that you guys are not doing what you're doing just to make money, but you want to make a positive impact to society,
Yeah.
right? And this is what I admire. And I would say that I'm very blessed to be a part of this community, and hopefully I can learn from you and many others within this community.
Yeah, just as much as I'm learning from you, and I'm learning from so many people in this community as well, right? That's awesome. You have shared so much wisdom on this call, and I think it's almost sad for us to kind of like go for the close to land the plane, but we have to. I think we can go on and on and on and on. So we normally end our podcast episodes with some quick fire questions, right? To end it, right? So these are just like a set of 3 questions. You just come with a 1 or 2 sentence answer. That's why it's called quick fire round, right? So are you ready for the quick fire round?
I'm not really, but I'll try.
Okay, you try. Alright. So I mean, just take whatever comes next as an experience.
Sure.
You might be changed, you may be transformed by that.
Wow, I hope so. Definitely.
All right. So the first question, right? What's the most powerful question you have ever been asked before?
Okay, this came in the form of a situation. It was in one of my employments with a tech company when my manager came to me one day and said, Frank, someone in a position has been fired. I think you are the best person to take on that job. After I was shocked and expressly so, I said, okay, I'll think about it. And my manager said, fantastic. Let me know in 1 hour's time. Didn't expect it, but it became a very powerful question. I have to evaluate, really my aspiration, whether I want to take on the job, my interests, my values, right? Of course, understanding what that job is really about and why was that person fired, right? All within an hour. So, to me, in retrospect, it's really about really literally thinking on the feet and getting all the information together in double quick time and making a quick decision.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I thought about this because, sometimes this is the situation where some leaders will have to experience. right? You have to make a quick decision with little information. There's a time set. You have to do it.
Out of curiosity, did you take that job?
I did.
And did it turn out well?
It turned out pretty well.
Oh, that's good.
Mm.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, so in 1 hour, you made that decision. You need to trust your gut.
Yeah, it's partially gut and partially looking at the situation. I did actually call the person who was let go and ask the background.
Ooh, wow. That must have been a difficult conversation to have.
Not easy because that person was also in a state of shock. But because we had very good relationship, so it wasn't seen to be very antagonist, and the person was willing to support me with very authentic and real answers.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. Next question. Who is a mentor or supporter that has made the biggest difference in your life? One person.
Well, this mentor and supporter would not know that I looked upon him as a mentee. It's Lee Kuan Yew, right? And in fact, I've never spoken with him, but through his book, through his report of what he said when he was the Prime Minister or even subsequently Senior Minister, I learned a lot. And the reason why I actually wanted to contribute back to society right now, hopefully in a very personal way, is because of what he has done for people like me who came from very humble background to be where I am today. And I felt so appreciative, so blessed that I believe that I wanted to contribute back to the society that brought me to where I am.
Wow, that's so inspiring. I mean, just listening to you share that, I'm really inspired. What's the most courageous decision you have made that has made the biggest difference in your life?
Actually, professionally, it would have been my decision to get out of corporate job. Right. First of all, it's very difficult to leave LinkedIn because it was such a great environment and I learned so much from there. But I thought that after having gone through a good ride of 8 years, even if, on the day that I leave, I will not have any income, that is still worth it because I can leverage on the experience that I've picked up over the last 8 years, the network and relationship I've built, to be able to do something that I truly want to be a part of. So it is a big risk, to the question that you ask, but and it's a big decision because I still have children in school, but in retrospect, I will never look back and regret on this decision because of just the learnings, the changes, the agility that I've go through, the new experiments that I have to make to be where I am today, even though it's just about 4 months. It's something that's very meaningful for me, and I'll never change the decision, even if I look back.
Wow. Thank you, Frank. Thank you for your sharing of wisdom on today's podcast episode. I think our listeners are very grateful to be able to learn all of this from you. Where can they get in touch with you if they like to find out more about your next play and also just to get in touch with you?
Right. Oh, first of all, Cohen, thank you so much for inviting me here. I learned so much from you in the course of this conversation. I learned quite a number of new terms as well, which make me thinking about the new philosophy of leadership. To get in touch with me, I'm always on LinkedIn, Frank, Koo, Frank Koo on LinkedIn. My company, Next Play, is also on LinkedIn. So that's the best place to be in touch with me. And look forward to catching up with more mission-driven and similarly minded people.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you so much.